Welcome to Food Crimes Boiled Pizza Edition, where today I'll be testing how much of a felony boiling pizza should be. Not only will I be trying the boiled pizza, but if it truly is bad, I'm going to try to see if I can find a way to legalize the crime and make boiled pizza palatable. I was inspired by a Reddit post I saw like 7 years ago, and for some reason thought, hey, I could do that if I really wanted to. Today I was using It's Not Delivery, it's DiGiorno, as well as a thinner crust pizza, just to see which will boil better at the start. My thinking was that the thin crust would get crispier and resist being dissolved in water, but only time will tell. I absolutely could just sous vide the pizza if I really wanted to, and if boiling the pizza alone is really that bad, which I will try as a control, but that's really boring to me. So I'm going to try reheating the pizza where the pizza is actually coming in contact with water. And I've thought up a few different ways of doing so. So while my pizzas are cooking, I'll explain that the backup methods to boiling that I've cooked up here are, in addition to the sous vide control, a sous vide bag with holes poked in it, coating the pizza in oil, and a cornstarch slurry. I'll of course explain my reasoning for each of those as we get there. This food crimes thing I'm doing right now is a series that I will be continuing, so definitely recommend subscribing if this is something that you think is stupid enough that's worth following. I have a few other ideas like pan-searing cereal or a fried Caesar salad that I will be trying out sometime in the next several weeks. As you'll be able to see here in a second, since I'm new to trying to record my cooking, I'm not used to the timing and other aspects of recording video, and the pizza, as you can see, the dough got kind of droopy and softened a little bit while I was waiting for the flatbread to cook. So I'm definitely still learning. For example, there's a chunk of the video a bit later that my audio just completely cut out. But I'm working on it, and hopefully all of these kind of weird quirks and things about my videos will get worked out. Now, my goal isn't to actually cook the pizza using boiling water, but simply just to heat it up, like a replacement for the microwave essentially. So I put it in the fridge for a day or two just so it would cool. That way I could use the boiling water to heat it up later. As you can see from the different lighting in my apartment, I was actually filming this pretty early in the morning. So not only was I having pizza for breakfast, but it was literally boiled pizza for breakfast. So not a great combo, don't recommend it. I would first be testing the flatbread and DiGiorno pizza just against each other. That way I could see whichever one was going to work better and I wouldn't have to do everything twice. While I initially thought the flatbread would actually work better, it was surprisingly flimsy after a day in the fridge. Now that I was getting my water boiling, just to even everything out, I decided that I would be putting the slices in for 90 seconds each time. It's a time that I had kind of tested a little bit before recording the video. That seemed like it would work pretty well. That way one slice isn't exposed to the heat and water longer than another. I started off with the flatbread first. And as you can see, pretty immediately, the crust was getting pretty soggy and wet. And as soon as I started to flip it over, you'll really be able to see just how wet and sloppy the top side was getting as it heated.
Oh no. Oh no.
I was already pretty pessimistic about this, but my expectations were really just getting worse at this point. After the 90 seconds, we actually got a pretty decent cheese pull, and it was time to try it. And as you can see, a ton of toppings got left behind. While the flatbread cooled, I cleaned out the pot a little bit from the leftover pepperoni and cheese that had fallen off. But while the flatbread cooled, I threw in the DiGiorno, and at this point I was feeling even worse about what I was doing with my life. I was actually pleasantly surprised at this point. The DiGiorno actually looked like it wasn't picking up too much water into the crust, and the toppings at least stayed on the pizza, sort of. So maybe it wouldn't be that bad. I could feel my stomach starting to get pretty upset with me by the time the DiGiorno was done. And so when I actually started comparing the two, it was pretty clear how disgusting the thin crust would be. The DiGiorno was wet, but it wasn't sopping like the thin crust. So I was at least a bit excited about that, if that's even the right word.
All right. For some reason, I thought it would be a good idea to boil pizza. I just really... We're gonna start with the DiGiorno. It's not as wet as I thought it would be. I guess just having a thicker crust is actually a good thing. Somehow I was thinking maybe having the thinner crust meant that there would be less carbs dissolving into the water and it would get less of that like mushy, soggy bread texture, but I was wrong. The DiGiorno actually doesn't seem that bad. It's definitely... It looks okay, but if you could touch this, my hand is getting wet every single time I remove my fingers off of it. Okay, I need to at least get a pepperoni on there. I'm gonna... There we go. Okay, hear me out, because all good things start off with a hear me out. It's really not that bad. For what I expected, it actually does look like, I'll bring this over here. The edges of it are definitely very soggy. Like as you can see, like kind of in the crust. This has definitely kind of just become one congealed blob of dough. But I think having a thicker crust meant that most of the inside of it is actually fine. It's warm. The whole pizza slice is warm, so it's really actually not that bad. The problem is for the first like 4 bites, every time you take, like my teeth would sink into it, water would come out. But it was not horrible. It was quite honestly not the worst pizza I think I've ever had in my life. Which is crazy to say, that someone has made pizza that's worse than pizza that I just boiled. This is the one that I'm more worried about. I don't know if you can hear that. It is sopping wet. This dough was already pretty mushy and soft when I brought it out of the fridge, so getting it crispy didn't really help at all. But there's, this is literally, if you've ever like dipped bread in water, this is exactly what it feels like. All right, we'll get a pepperoni onto the tip. Oh. Okay. So this is weird. It's kind of, if you've just watched my video about the eggs, the issue is not the taste. The pepperoni is doing a lot of carrying here. I'm glad I chose to do pepperoni instead of just cheese. The taste isn't that bad. I'm a terrible person with textures. Textures really suck for me. One of those textures that really sucks is like wet bread. And this was just a huge bite of wet bread with a little bit of pepperoni on the top.
This was quite literally one of the worst texture experiences with food I've ever had in my life. It felt like eating a sponge that had just been soaked in a whole bunch of oatmeal. You can even see how wet my hands were after putting down the pizza. Neither of these boiled pizzas felt edible, which is why I'm pretty confidently throwing them into the not edible category. First one on the channel. 0 out of 10 experience. So as I mentioned before, the experiment isn't stopping here. I'm now going to be trying out various ways of boiling pizza until I can find one that works. For these, I'm going to be grading them on 2 separate scales, how good the pizza tastes and how fun the idea was. I know it's kind of weird for me to have picked the scale for fun out of 7, but I can do whatever I want. The sous vide pizza was my control, but I knew this is going to work pretty well, and it's also boring as hell, so we're of course not going to stop here. After the typical 90 seconds, I went ahead and took it out of the bag just to make sure that it was warm, and gave it the good old-fashioned taste test. This is where my mic started having pretty serious problems, as you can hear after I take this bite. Basically, I was just trying to state that the pizza actually tasted pretty good, as you can imagine. I ended up finishing the whole slice, but blah, blah, blah. No one really cares since it's the control, and it's boring. The sous vide pizza would be the comparison tool now at this point that I'd be comparing everything else to. So what I thought to do next would be to use a sous vide bag, but I'm gonna poke holes into the bag so that water can at least touch the pizza. It might sound like a weird thing for me to say out of context, but again, that's kind of the whole point of what I'm doing here. I kind of expected water to get into the bag, but my goal was hopefully that the holes were small enough that not a lot of water would be able to get in and the pizza would still be able to be warmed through the bag. But as you'll start to see, the thing I didn't consider is that once the water gets in, it wouldn't leave. So eventually the pizza was just sitting in water, just now in a bag. As you can see, my expectations for how good this would be pretty quickly shrunk. But my thinking was that the water wouldn't have as much time to dissolve the crust, so maybe it wouldn't be as bad as the just normal boiled pizza. Yeah, this was bad. This was really bad. The sous vide with holes was barely edible. I'm gonna give it a 2 on the taste or texture scale and a 4 on the fun scale. That brings the point total to 6, which I'm desperately hoping will be pretty easy to beat. See, it wasn't super wet, but still like 99% wetter than you'd want your pizza. And it was like putting a wet sock in your mouth. Up next would be an oil coating around the pizza. My thinking here was that since oil is hydrophobic, which is kind of crazy in this day and age, basically the oil would scare away the water from the pizza, but still allow some of the heat to transfer over to the pizza. I had zero expectations that this would work, but I had already nearly thrown up from eating boiled pizza, so why not try it again? It was finally time to give tofu his patented sniff test and time to throw it in. As I threw it in, you could pretty much immediately see some of the oil falling off the pizza. Pretty good exhibit of the hydrophobic effect there, which also meant that water was probably getting into the slice, unfortunately. This made me think that if I were to have done this again, I probably would have let the pizza sit in the oil for a little bit, just so the crust could maybe soak up some of the oil a little bit and maybe hopefully prevent water from getting in a little bit better. As you can see, it was still dripping wet, but it actually wasn't as bad as I was expecting it to be, and it definitely wasn't as bad initially as the boiled pizza. I had to mute myself here because, again, my mic wasn't working. But really, this wasn't that bad. I could actually taste some of the oil that I'd put onto the pizza, so it did stay on pretty well. And it did actually do a pretty good job of preventing water from actually getting inside the pizza. Some of the sides of the crust were a little bit damp. As you can see, the inside of the crust was actually pretty dry. I was getting a little bit bold at this point and took another bite, but it still was not good. And definitely not worth it. 4 for fun, 5 for taste. Up next was a cornstarch slurry. My thinking here was a bit inspired by a Chinese cooking technique called velveting, where you use a cornstarch slurry to gelatinize as soon as it's heated, pretty much preventing water from leaving the chicken. That's why a lot of Chinese chicken that's been velveted is pretty moist. Cornstarch initially is hydrophilic, meaning that it really likes to hang out with water. They're good buddies. But at higher temperatures, it gelatinizes and dehydrates, sort of forming like a glassy film around whatever you're cooking, like chicken, but in my case, pizza. Theoretically. That was the idea, but whether or not that would work inside boiling water, I was pretty doubtful.
Oh, there's no way this is gonna work. This is terrible.
I was looking for there to be a slightly glossy look on the outside of the pizza, but immediately as I put it in, it basically just looked like the cornstarch was dissolving straight into the water. But only time would tell, and it was at least fun to try to get something out of my biology degree. I gave it the typical 90 seconds, just like all of the other slices, and removed it from the water. Feeling around the pizza, it basically just felt damp. So this initially felt like a fail. And yet again, it was time. It was a pretty high likelihood that I did not put enough cornstarch on this to get the kind of the effect that I was looking for. Just like touching around it a little bit, I will say that the cheese actually feels pretty okay for the most part, but it still just feels like wet, soggy pizza. I can't believe I'm saying this. This is actually not that bad. But like, I'm willing to take a second bite. Like, I don't know. Maybe I cheated. This is really not that bad. The edges are a little wet, as you can imagine. So it didn't work perfectly. I don't know what you want me to tell you. So what I think happened is that the gelatinization probably worked slightly, but realistically the cornstarch probably just mostly dissolved into the water, mostly because water can't get hot enough to truly velvet cornstarch. I do, however, think it's possible that the dissolving of the cornstarch coat might have given the pizza enough time to heat up without the crust immediately dissolving in the water. So with that being said, I am going to actually give the cornstarch slurry the best taste score out of any of the weird things that I did. I'm going to give it a 6, and I'm going to give it a 7 for fun. That's going to bring the cornstarch slurry to a shocking score of 13 out of 17. So now at this point, we've definitely proven that boiled pizza is in fact a food crime, and there's nothing really to save it from that. But if you use an oil coating or a cornstarch slurry, it's actually really not that bad. Definitely still illegal, but I'd say using one of my weird ways of cooking pizza, or at least heating up the pizza using boiling water, it's closer to jaywalking than it is murder. Oh, I should not be doing this on wood.